Silence was literally killing people.
I have experienced such incredible pain that I didn't think I could get through it. You're not crazy. There's nothing wrong with you. We blame people for their suffering.
Yes. You handed me a card, you'd see me play, and said, if you ever need anybody, if you ever want to talk, call me. I had hit a really, really low place, and I called you.
Today, I have my very special guest, Angie Stevens, one of my most favorite people in the world. Angie Stevens is a singer-songwriter from Denver, Colorado. Angie's past of abuse, neglect, and the suicide of her brother became a catalyst for depression and anxiety, but it also fueled her passion for singing and songwriting. When Angie started writing and performing music about her experiences at the age of 18, her healing began. Now, after more than 20 years in the music industry, Angie has won several songwriting awards, including the Best Singer-Songwriter by Westward, which is a Denver magazine, both by the editor of the magazine and by Reader's Choice. She has done songwriting workshops with the Eating Disorder Unit at the Denver Children's Hospital, and she was a songwriting teacher for Link's Art Summer Camp at CU Denver. I had the serendipitous fortune of attending one of her earlier performances in an intimate studio setting in Boulder, Colorado. And from the very first song, I was hooked. It'll make me cry. Angie has a rare gift for sharing her life stories through heartfelt and passionate music that draws the listeners straight into her heart. Since that unforgettable night, I've been one of her biggest fans, following her remarkable evolution as an artist while witnessing her inspiring journey of growth and healing as a human being.
Wow.
Welcome, Angie. We're going to start with tears. We're just going to get them out of the way.
Wow. What an intro. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
It's an honor to be here with you.
It's an honor to have you here.
You
I
are.
feel very, very, very blessed to have you here in your presence because I think you're a remarkable human being.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate you opening your heart, not only to the world, but right here. I mean, I think that, it's interesting. I love music. I've always loved music. As a matter of fact, as a little girl, I think music is the thing that saved me.
Yeah.
I remember being 8 and getting my first stereo, and that was the thing. That was my company. And I'd be great at name that tune. I can tell you a song after 3 notes. Let me tell you, I'm good at it. So I think just my love for music, it just even opened even more in terms of there's a lot of artists out there, and you are very gifted. I mean, I have never had anybody just take the listener right to the heart. And I think that is so special. That's your gift.
Well, thank you. I take songwriting so seriously, and I think there's such power in sharing story. I think there's such power in community and coming together and just being vulnerable and honest. And that has been my saving grace ever since I was a kid, was by writing songs. And even when I was younger, I was writing songs when I was 8 years old. Just trying to make sense of the world around me. And that's continued to be, a navigating piece of my life, to make sense of the chaos that swirls. And songs are powerful, and stories are powerful, and we can get a lot out of listening to music, and we can get a lot out of writing our stories.
Oh.
Yeah.
I would imagine that a lot of people know you as Angie Stevens, right? And they know the singer, and they know the songwriter. And I can't even. I know that I've known you for quite some time, and I've actually stood next to you as you've experienced life, as a songwriter, and I know that it's a rough road. And I think one of the things that stands out for me, and I think this is even becoming more of an issue, is that people will often relate to performers as if they're not human. Like, you know, and I'm curious, you know, you used music. Music was your lifeline. Music was your therapy, I would imagine.
It was,
And it was deeply personal.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear, you know, I think for me, I think about those two realities, the realities of this is deeply personal, and I'm sharing me, my heart, my pain, my life experiences with the world as a gift to them, but also for my own healing. And then of course you have the way the world receives it and what they do with that. And
right.
I'd love to talk about both of those paths, but let's start with the first one. I mean, tell us a little bit about, like, you know, you said that you started writing at 8 to make sense of things.
Yeah. You know, first I was just writing lyrics at the time at 8. I didn't play an instrument. I started writing just little rhythmic pieces of things I could sing. I knew I loved to sing. I would set up the vacuum as my, you know, it was my microphone, and I would sing it. And, you know, I was a child that was living with a mother who struggled with addiction. And we didn't have a lot of authority. We didn't have, you know, our parents weren't home. So I spent a lot of time in my own world, and music, whether it was listening to music or writing music, it was kind of my way of, like I said, making sense of the world, but also just trying to self-soothe. Music was self-soothing for me. And once I got my brother's guitar. So when I was 16, my mom gave me my brother's guitar, which was a Fender Stratocaster. And that's what I learned to play guitar on, which was beautiful. And I started to realize that I wanted to take all of these experiences that I had as a child, and, you know, including the death of my brother and the craziness with my mom, and I wanted to figure out how to say it in a way that someone else could understand it and relate to the experience. And that sounds like that's easy, but it's not. Because you really have to tap into your most vulnerable self. And the interesting part about songwriting teaching is that when I would try to do, and this is, I'll circle back to it, but you can't really get out of the truth when you're doing songwriting. You have to go straight to the point. You have to go straight to the message. And so I just began. I just started singing songs, and, you know, the performance aspect of being on stage and connecting to the audience. The first time I wanted to turn around, I didn't even want to look at the audience because it was so scary. And I am nervous Nelly. It's hard for me to perform. And so I really had to battle that, my internal, you know, wanting to be perfect, and then just allowing myself to tell my story. And so I think in writing songs that were so near and dear, that were so vulnerable, I knew what was coming. I knew that the audience was going to know more about me than maybe I was comfortable with. And I got used to that. I got used to just being transparent. And what I realized was that the community of people, whether they were my fan base, whether they were the musicians, all aligned with that same truth. And it was this beautiful place of healing. And at the same time, I had to take reprieve. You know, you have to have time to go inward. And there were certain things that I was not ready to talk about, or I wasn't willing to talk about. And so some of those things I kept under lock and key, you know, and I kept those outside of the public eye and journaled about it and had time and space for myself. So, it's a journey.
It is a journey, and I can only imagine. I'm sure that we have a lot to cover, because it's been, I mean, I'm doing the math. You've been singing, it's over 20 years.
Yeah.
And you've been with music for even longer than that.
Yeah.
How did you go to the place of writing music and singing music for yourself, to performing? Because you said, oh, I was a nervous Nelly. I didn't want to be in front of people. What made you go that direction with your music?
I think the drive to perform came from that need for connection. And it came from a place of me wanting to find other humans who had been through what I had been through, because I'd spent a lot of time growing up in isolation. And so it was my way of building community. And so that became a conscious choice. And what that meant is every single time I'd go on stage, I knew I was going to go through at least 3 songs of being completely nervous and having to literally just swallow down all of my anxiety, and just face what it is and face my gift and say, you're here, you're going to tell your story, and you're going to look out in the audience and you're going to look into all of their eyes, a lot of them who are crying. I don't know if that's a gift or a curse. And just be honest. Having a space to be honest was important to me, and the topics, singing songs about my mom being in a domestic violence situation, and writing it from the perspective of an 11-year-old girl, and being able to put that into a song and then put that into a show when I was in my 20s, and realizing that there was a lot of people that had been through that. There was a lot of people that, and they didn't have the words yet, how to emote the things that maybe I was speaking about, and it was healing. Mm-hmm. And I've cried a lot of tears on stage, but I'm okay with that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm also thinking about the context, the time.
Yeah.
And we're looking at the early 2000s, mm-hmm. that you were on stage.
Yeah.
And you were singing about things that people didn't talk about. 24 years is a long time ago, in the sense of people didn't share emotional experiences. They didn't share what was happening inside of them. They kept it kind of undercover, mm-hmm. Because it just wasn't something that we did. And it could be even more so depending on how you grew up and that kind of thing. And so I would imagine that when you had the courage to come out and sing on stage, and again, I think what's really important, and oh my goodness, I absolutely encourage and invite the listeners to listen to your music, because it is amazing. It is powerful. It's life-changing. It's heartfelt, and you just do a tremendous job at bringing somebody to just human experience. And doing it at that time, one of the things that I wonder about is, you have such a passionate following. The people that follow you love you, and they love your story. And I wonder how much, when you were talking about, I was looking for connection.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people connect with that experience. Like, oh my God, she sees me, or she knows what that feels like, because I don't know, music is a different language, but mm-hmm. what's really interesting is that music goes right past your head. Yeah. I mean, it goes right past your head, into your heart, and into your body.
Yeah.
So it communicates and connects with you on ways that we're not accustomed to connecting, especially 20 years ago, right? Yeah. And what I wonder about for you, Angie, I think about the time, your own evolution, like thinking about getting on stage at, mm-hmm. performing at 18. You're a child. I mean, you know that, right? You're 18, you're a kid.
Yeah. So when I was 12 years old, I moved to Fargo, North Dakota from Rapid City. And North Dakota was a very interesting place to go through middle school and high school. They didn't speak about hard things out loud. If you were depressed, it was you were depressed. Mm-hmm. If somebody had cancer, you had cancer. Uh-huh. We didn't talk about it. And what I was seeing in my surroundings, that silence was literally killing people. We had very high suicide rates. I had a friend almost every year who was dying by suicide, and we just weren't talking about it. And the silence became deafening. It became to the point where I was like, I can't live inside, the silence anymore. And it was like breaking out of it. And it was honoring those who had died. It was honoring my brother who had died at 23 by suicide, who was a musician. and saying, I want to honor him. That's why I go by Angie Stevens. His name is Steven. I want to honor him. He wanted to be a musician. He wanted to say his piece, and he didn't. And now it's time. It's time to take these words that we should not be whispering, that we should be, proud to talk about, just as any other issue that we may have, whether that's anxiety or depression or a shared experience, and talking about it so that it doesn't have darkness, have a place of darkness for, depression and anxiety to grow. So I thought of it as a responsibility, and I loved being in the music scene. I loved touring and I loved going across the country, but it's hard on your soul, when you get to a point where you're singing such vulnerable messages and your songs become, I always say, your soul becomes commerce. It can be very challenging. Because if I write a song about an experience that I had where somebody had died in my life and yet they don't feel it's radio ready, and it's not going to sell, that doesn't make that song any less important to me. However, I do have to pivot my business based around what sells. So after churning through that system, and playing some really incredible shows, I really had to analyze how important the business aspect of that was for me. And after giving so much, I decided, this ultimately isn't where I want to end up. It doesn't mean that I don't love performing, which I still do, but I don't want to be in the churn and burn. And I wanted to turn my focuses to teaching songwriting to people, giving people resources to talk about their stories. At the eating disorder unit, they weren't songwriters, but they got to write out, each person got to write a line of something that they felt, and we were all working together. And it's an incredible song. At the end of this class, we took all of the pieces and I wrote this song. They got to pick how fast it was. They got to pick if it was going to go big during the chorus, if we were going to have a bridge. And it was a community effort. It was absolutely incredible. And that song hangs in my office as a good reminder. Because again, your songs are about experience, and songs are about sharing not only wisdom, but also hope that, we can get through it,
Did your 18-year-old self know, I've got to do this, that I've got this responsibility, I need to share this, I need to be vulnerable? Did your 18-year-old self know these things?
I think in some aspects, yes. I was angsty, and I was listening to really, really powerful musicians, like Ani DeFranco, and people that were fighting social issues. And I felt like I really did want to break the silence, whether that was even in my own life or in my own community. Now, whether I knew where I was headed or, how many cities I would play, I think I took it one show at a time, and then one album at a time and one song at a time, where I just continued to follow that path of just being honest and being true. And it was probably the only space really in my whole life that I was giving myself permission to be that honest. So, yeah.
Wow. So it was not only just a gift that you were sharing with the world, you were giving yourself something.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm wondering if in some ways you were hiding behind that performance, okay, nobody knows that this is actually good. This is actually for me. Yeah. I'm healing. They don't know that.
Yeah.
That wasn't something that was obvious.
Yeah.
It's cool to be on a path with you in parts. I know I haven't been there 100% of the time, but I know enough that I can hear the things that you say and go, oh, I remember, I remember having a conversation about this.
Yeah.
But this idea of you're bearing your soul. You are being vulnerable. You are naked on stage, and you are showing everything about you, which is incredibly courageous, right? And right up against it, you're having to grapple with selling your soul. And, people talk about the music industry as that. Are you going to sell your soul? Your songs are just, there's just so much depth of human experience in it. one of my favorite songs is Judy. I mean, it's one of my favorite songs.
Yeah.
And it's about your mother, and it's about the domestic violence, and it's about her settling for less, like being second, in everyone's life. And you talk about so many just common painful human experiences: domestic violence, addiction, not being chosen, depression, suicide, all of these things. And yet you do it in a way, this is going to sound really weird, your music is not morose. It's not morose. It's not like, oh my God, kill me now, I don't want to listen to it. There's something that you do that you are very gifted at, that it's like you acknowledge the pain, and you do it in such a way that has depth and texture to it, but you actually cut through it, and you find the beauty, like you find the heart, you find the beauty, you find the life in such a way that the listener can go through it and still come out of it and go, oh my God, this is amazingly powerful.
Yeah. And
I'm curious about how you do that. And I'm curious about, is it a conscious thing? Like when you write, do you write and go, okay, I'm going to write about my mother, being abused, or am I even witnessing it? And am I going to write because I need to get it out of my own system, or I need to write it for somebody? I mean, is it that deliberate?
I think certain songs can be deliberate. I think the nugget of hope that I try to put in each song is not only a buoy for the listener, but it's also a buoy for me. I struggled with depression. I had, like I had said earlier, I was living with an addict. My mom was a pretty severe addict, and involved in some domestic violence situations. And then I also had a father who was incredibly religious, to the point of neglectful, based on what he felt was right and what he felt was wrong. And during my childhood years, I found my way by being a caretaker. So I spent my energy and all of my mental capacity taking care of my mom, making sure she was okay, making sure that she was safe, right? I didn't know that I had anxiety and depression at the time. So when we moved to Fargo and my mom got sober, as soon as the external chaos stopped, the internal chaos for me began. And that's when I started really facing all of my own feelings. And I got so bad that I was hospitalized. I was put in a mental hospital, and I had to go through 7 days. I was in there for 7 days and really face myself, face my own feelings, face what I had been through as a child. And I went out and I started thriving again. But as that anxiety would grow, I needed to have a place to put it. I needed to figure out how to channel it, and that's really where music came in. And as honest as I've been about my story, only a few years ago, as I had been through so many chaotic situations, and my son was leaving. My son had graduated. He was happy and healthy. He was on his own. Everything, all the external chaos went away. And all of a sudden, the internal chaos came back again. And there I was, facing my own suicidal thoughts, just like I did when I was 11 years old. And that's not a story I've shared very often on stage, but I wanted to share that with you. And I wanted to share that with the audience because I think it's very real. And, we will always, at the end of the day, have to face ourselves. And as much as I love to pour myself into my music, into my family and my friends and my community, it's still so very important to come back to yourself and face your own anxiety and your own, those crazy thoughts that sometimes plague us,
First of all, I want to just state the obvious. The obvious is suicide is such a taboo subject people don't talk about it.
It is.
And yet, it is much more of a common experience than anybody's willing to admit.
Mm-hmm.
It's like any other human experience. Mm-hmm. It's as common as loss. It's as common as depression. It's as common as anxiety. It's as common as fear. It's common as joy.
Right.
And yet nobody ever talks about it. You know, I actually had my own suicide story, and where I actually began the actions of it and stopped myself. And that's one thing. I think the second thing that I believe people really misunderstand is they believe that suicide is a manifestation of being lost as a young person. And that's not true. That is not true.
Right.
You know, we can be 35, we can be 55, we can be 75, because age has nothing to do with it. And it has nothing to do with being lost. It has to do with pain. That's what it has to do with. It's pain.
Right.
And people who can, and that's what I think is so important. Pain is part of being human.
Right.
And sometimes what happens is, and I can speak from this personally, I'm not going to speak about your experience. I can say this from my experience, that I have had situations in my life where I have experienced such incredible pain that I didn't think I could get through it.
Right.
And that is what drove me to think about it. That is the thing. You're not crazy. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not different. You know, we are in a world that we blame people for their suffering.
Yes.
And their pain.
And we shame them.
And we shame them. And it drives me crazy, because what happens is silence is dangerous.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And in my family, you know, I lost my brother by suicide, and then I lost my nephew by suicide. They were the same age. And then I have a cousin who we lost to suicide. And so how the external world would talk to me about suicide was very, you know, and again, that comes into based on belief systems, you know, with a shameful attitude, you know, that it's very shameful. And so I think that keeps you from talking about your own experiences, your own thoughts. And, you know, you have been with me for 18 years. Like, you've always played an important role in my life. And I've learned a lot just about, you know, allowing thoughts to come in and not giving them so much power. And the more we shame having thoughts of suicide, the more we shame openly talking about mental health, the more there is room for darkness to grow. And I think there's power in speaking out and telling our stories.
Right. Right.
I came to you at 27. I met you through one of our mutual friends, and you handed me a card. You'd see me play and said, if you ever need anybody, if you ever want to talk, you know, call me. And I kept that card for months because I was terrified. And I had hit a really, really low place, and I called you, and I came to you broken. I think the first time we met, the whole hour I just cried. And that began this journey of you helping me see how so many things throughout my life, throughout my trauma and everything that I experience, you helped me to build healthy boundaries. You helped me to say, like, it's okay to feel pain. It's okay to not take care of people all the time. It's okay for you to build some space to just fall apart. And you were such a huge part of my journey. I can't say enough. I mean, my friends, you know, I've been talking about you since I was 27, so they've all heard stories of you, you know. I remember when I opened for Melissa Etheridge in Fort Collins. It's the biggest crowd I ever played. It was over 10,000 people. And I was so nervous. And so I made sure you were on that stage with me. And you were to my stage right. and you were my support system. And I cannot thank you enough. And also, I hear so many horror stories about going to therapy. I hear so many horror stories about, I'm scared. Therapy, they just tell you what you want to hear. You have never told me what I wanted to hear. And that's my favorite part. You would help really fill in the gaps in places that I was scared to going with my homework and morsels of knowledge. And I think having a good therapist is a really important piece, because words like suicide, words like depression, words like anxiety can be scary when you're navigating that alone. To have someone that you can walk through that with and realize, like, hey, it's okay. You're going to have feelings. Now, what are you going to do with that? How are you going to come back out of your mind and back into your body? And for me, coming out of my mind and back into my body is playing music. Taking moments of silence and reconnecting to myself. But you have been a gigantic piece of that puzzle for me. And I just want to thank you. I mean, yeah.
Angie, of course, I'm a big crybaby. I'm sorry. I'm trying to think about how to say this. You talk about therapy, right? And it's interesting because I've been on my own journey, right? I've been on my own evolution. And at some point I bucked it. It was like, this therapy shit isn't for me. I don't believe in it. I don't know if I've ever told you this. I never had this experience before in that moment for quite some time, since I was a little kid. I sat there and I listened to all of your songs again. I mean, I'd listened to them when I first met you. And there was something deep in me that said, go talk to her. And it wasn't about trying to sell myself to you. It was really about some deep guidance said, she needs you, go talk to her. And the reason I tell you this is because it was so out of character for me. I was an introvert. I lived with a shell around me all of the time because, like you, I grew up in an environment of a lot of abuse, a lot of violence, and a lack of safety. And I moved through the world in a bubble, and I didn't let people get in, and I didn't go out of it.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was huge. I believe that was a spiritual intervention. And so the reason I tell you this, and I say that I'm bucking therapy, is my going through this journey with you wasn't about my being your therapist.
Yeah.
My going through this journey with you was my being a human who just happened to have training. But being a human, like, I made that moment that I gave you my card. I made this decision in my mind that I had a lifelong commitment to you in whatever form it took. And I understand you walked through the door as a client. And it has evolved from that.
Oh, yeah.
That was long ago. And so it's also important that what I believe is that when you have those divine matchings, I'm getting as much out of it as you are.
Yeah. And
if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And it's just like playing music,
It
right?
is.
It's the same cycle of that connective piece, that as much as I'm putting out, I'm getting right back.
Yes.
And the one important piece that therapy, and specifically you, is you gave me safety, which is something I'm not sure I ever felt so safe with my feelings outside of just singing them. So having a place to feel safe. And our therapy, we did pretty extensive immersive therapy, and then we went from that to life coaching, and then we graduated to friends.
Yeah.
And now I'm also pursuing mental health. I'm in school. I'm gonna get my master's in social work so that I can do therapy as well. You've inspired me, and taking my gifts that I do on stage to also trying to. I always said the reason why I want to be a therapist is because there needs to be more Charleanas in the world. There just does. And I feel like I've been a student of how you connect to people, and you're a mentor to me. And so if I can emulate any of that, I want to, you know?
Thank you. Thank you.
I love you. I totally love you.
And I love you as well. I feel extremely fortunate. Like, I feel very blessed and very gifted. And when I say gifted, I don't mean my gifts, but the universe gifting to me the opportunity to have experiences like this, because this is worth more than anything in the world, is to be able to be on a journey with somebody and be right next to them. And this is this whole thing about bucking therapy.
Yeah.
I'm not above you. I'm not above you. I'm not below you. I'm not behind you. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
And that was always important to me. And when I say I am right there with you, I'm feeling it with you. I'm sweating with you.
Right.
I'm taking the pain in with you.
Yeah.
And I'm celebrating.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, I remember the concert up at Fort Collins, and it was like, you go, girl, opening for Melissa Etheridge? What the hell? And I was just beaming with pride.
Yeah.
You know, because it was like, you were doing it. And I remember this is coming up for me right now, and I don't know if you remember this, and it was around your anxiety. And I said, Angie, all you have to do is show up.
Just show up.
That's all you have to do.
Yeah.
The rest will take care of itself. And that's what you do, is you just show up and you be Angie.
Yeah.
And that's enough.
It is enough.
Right?
Yeah. And I mean, that has stuck with me. You know, let's talk about the journey that you've been next to me. Starting at 27, just recently getting a divorce, to then having, you know, some of my very near and dear friends pass away, to I had breast cancer. And I'm 2 years out, but you were by my side with that, then losing my nephew by suicide, then my own internal, external struggles around, you know, mental health. And what resonated through my head is exactly what you said. Angie, just show up. Like, you will be okay. You've always been by my side. And I think that and you've also celebrated the victories, whether it was the big shows or just getting through an experience. I remember when we met when I was in the middle of chemo, and we both just cried our eyes out, you know, and it was like, it was hard, but at the same time, it's like, I'm going through it, and I see the other side, and this may suck, but you just got to keep going, and you have to find the light. And for me, that is hope. Regardless of, you know, having to get surgeries or chemo or radiation, it was the hope that got me through it, you know? It was having that light. It was knowing that there's going to be those little magic moments along the way. And you have to take that in, and you have to celebrate that, you know? And you were so good at helping me to just stop for a minute and just be like, what can I celebrate? I can celebrate that I have a great community of humans. I can celebrate that we can have really good, hard conversations, you know, and just celebrating the things that maybe you take for granted.
What makes me sad is we can be with each other. I mean, as humans,
Right.
there is so much power. There is so much power, and there is so much love, and there's so much hope, and there's so much connection, and there's so much strength when you just show up and you are with somebody with no judgment,
Right.
compassion, and you don't have to know the answers. Just, I love you. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right here with you. I'll hold your hand. I'll just sit here. And there's so much power in that. And it makes me sad because I see where we are today.
Right.
People are incredibly lonely. They're incredibly disconnected. You know, it's a world of information instead of connection.
Right.
And it's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking. And so I think about our journey together. And I'm incredibly grateful because it brings me to the beauty, the absolute beauty in real human connection.
Yes.
And, you know, something that I think about, and I think about this too, because it's like, okay, I remember, you know, it's interesting, and I didn't even think about this into this moment. So my brother that's right next to me, Ted, he actually attempted suicide as well. And I'm the oldest, and I was the caretaker as well. And I was taking care of my mother. My mother was not an addict, but my mother was is a very damaged human being, and she struggled. And I, as soon as I could walk, I was taking care of her.
Yeah.
And I remembered in my 20s, late 20s, I had a realization that I was saving everybody, and that who needed saving was me.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, when I had that realization, it was like, I need to save myself.
Yeah.
I'm living vicariously. I'm being the hero for everybody else. I need to be the hero for me. And when I did that, and then I showed up differently. I showed up differently. I didn't need to save you. And I don't save anybody.
Right.
I show up believing that what you need is inside of you. I'm just here with you.
Right.
And as we do that, and I give me to you in that regard, then the beauty is you take that,
right,
and you give it to somebody else.
Yeah.
You talked about the loss in your life, the loss of your brother, the loss of your nephew, the loss of friends, in some ways the loss of your mother to addiction, all these things. And then we go through our journey, you do all this healing, and one of the things that I just admired about you, I was just in awe about this, was you made the decision to be with your friend who died of cancer.
Yes.
You made a conscious, loving decision that you were going to walk every step of the way with her.
Mm-hmm.
And how incredible. And so your life has been surrounded by loss, by death, right? Death. And then you chose it. You actually chose, I know what I'm getting myself into.
Right.
And I'm going to see this all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And what a beautiful gift for her and a beautiful gift for you.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you're comfortable talking about that, like choosing it, actually choosing that.
Yeah. I just had my mom was just here this last weekend, and I had said to her, Mom, the one thing no one ever told me about growing up, and like getting older is the amount of deaths that you'll go through, and just how to cope with all of that. And she said, your situation seems to be a little bit different. And I said, what do you mean by that? Because I think I was taken back. You love so hard. And you want to be there during every part of someone's life. And some people, that it's just too uncomfortable. It's too uncomfortable. And it's okay that it's uncomfortable for some people. I think, I had two friends that passed away, one right after another. So 2018 and 2019. And my first friend who had died from cancer, she had a bunch of different people. She was an incredible person sorry.
It's okay.
She had a very large community of people, and I remember going to the hospital, and there were 20 to 30 people in her room at all times. And that's how she wanted it. She wanted to have her people coming in and out. There was music playing. You almost felt like you were at a celebration of life every single day. It was not about her death. It was celebrating her life even as she was passing. And I did think about leaving, especially towards the end. I didn't know if I'd be able to handle it. I didn't know, those last moments. Mm-hmm. However, I hugged her. And this was a few days before, and I said, she was very lucid. And the crazy part about that is that she wasn't on any medication. She had a breathing tube in. So she was very uncomfortable, but she wanted to be lucid until the last moment. So that is what I call bravery. Mm-hmm. Me being there and witnessing her power and her beauty and her way of wanting every single moment to matter. And I hugged her and I said, I don't know what you're wanting, but I will stay until the end. I think I said, I will stay until you want me to go. I said, do you want me to stay? And she shook her head yes. And that was what I needed. And we played music and just loved on her. And I watched her leave this earth. And I couldn't walk. I couldn't talk. It took me, I think, 2 hours before I had words. And I think some of that was because I had prepared for everything except for the intense experience of it actually happening. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't change any of it. It was an honor to be there, and it gave me a lot of knowledge about how to be there for someone when my other friend had breast cancer. Mm-hmm. And, we played her caretakers, and it was a beautiful relationship to have. And I think it's everybody's own choice and how comfortable they are with death. I was never comfortable with it, but I wanted to be there. And again, just show up. Mm-hmm. You have to take your feelings, and what I did in those moments was celebrate life and not focus so much on the death of it. And that's what got me through, was just consistently every moment that they were there celebrating their life. And I think there's not one fiber in my body that is the same there's not one bit of me that is the same after going through death experiences. And I am grateful that part of me has evolved. Mm-hmm. I have a better understanding. I don't have as much fear around death, and I wouldn't give up any of those moments, the hardest ones, for anything. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's beautiful. And what comes up for me is this idea that people overthink this. Mm-hmm. They get in their heads too much. They get freaked out about it. And a lot of times it's just as simple as presence.
Yeah.
Just presence.
Yeah.
You don't have to know the answers. You don't need the answers.
No.
And people cheapen or they diminish the value of I'm here with you.
Right.
And I will be here with you no matter what.
And there's experiences that we miss by letting fear get in the way. Like, being fearful of something, just like with stage or anything, or anxiety. If I let that run my life, there's so many things I would have missed out on. And even though I could have been fearful of being next to someone during the hardest moments of their life, I also got the greatest gift of being there, in the last moments of their life.
Right.
And that's an honor to be there, and death brings a sense of humility and a sense of grace and understanding. Death happens in life. We don't talk about it as, we don't even get taught about grief when we're younger, so it's like a crash course. And especially around the pandemic and, stuff was happening. And so crash coursing through death can be hard, and it's going to happen to all of us, so it just happened to me earlier. And, I feel like I'm 1.5 million years old and I'm okay with that.
You're okay with that. I was thinking, I was anticipating our conversation today, and it's just this whole idea of your life experience and how much death you've experienced. I've had my own experiences of death, when I lost my father, and my experience of that was actually, quite frankly, surprising, and I was really sitting with this idea of death is it's like it made me think of like, something like a knife cutting through something. It's like it's such a moment of discernment like in that moment, there's something that happens. To me, it's a spiritual experience where everything that doesn't matter, like, in the moment, like it's just like a snap of a finger. You're like, you just have this wisdom and deep discernment about what is really important and what really matters. Everything else falls away. And it's almost like you think about just, the spotlight just going right down into this moment of truth, and everything else is blacked out. And it's powerful. We are so afraid of it, and yet it's so powerful. Like you said, it's changed every fiber of your being. Before my father passed, I had not had experience with family members dying. And so I was really surprised by my experience of my father's death. And I mean, it changed my life. I mean, when you talk about every fiber of your being, who I am today and who I've become is a result of his death. And I did not have a good relationship with my father. And I loved my father. I respected parts of who he was, but I was also terrified of him. He was the aggressor in my life. My dad was verbally abusive, and my dad was physically abusive, and I was terrified of him. He was not safe to me. He was not the parent I wanted him or needed him to be. And so I kept him at arm's length. I did not have, I had an amicable relationship with him. It was like the neighbor down the street. And so when he passed, it hit me in a very profound way. And it will make me cry. The loss. And what the loss was, it was the loss. I had to let go of the hope it would ever be different because he was gone.
Yeah.
And so there was that. And I think that was a big part of it. But I think most importantly, it changed the trajectory of my life. And so before he passed when I was 47, so it was 12 years ago. And before he passed, I would, it's interesting. I'm actually writing a book about my life, and I talk about this time from my dark awakening at 29 to 47. I spent that time, people didn't know this, secretly in darkness and swimming in my trauma and swimming in my woundedness and being in therapy and just drowning in sorrow and drowning in pain and not being able to get myself out of it and then getting frustrated with myself and then resigning myself to this is just the way it's going to be. I'm going to be depressed and I'm going to be in constant grief and loss and sorrow and wishing, that I had things I didn't have.
Yeah.
And then he passed, and I had a very big spiritual awakening, and it was palpable. I mean, it was literally the moment he died, I knew he died. And I call it in my book, an unveiling. I literally felt this veil lift and this voice in me saying, you're going to see, you are now going to see. And I saw it all. I saw the dysfunction in my family. I saw that I was eluding myself. Like it wasn't what it was. I made it something that it wasn't.
Right.
And then the biggest thing was what happened in my relationship with him. Like, he would come to me. And when I say, what I mean by he would come to me is, I could be having a conversation with somebody and somebody would say, here's a message for you. And it would be from my dad.
Wow.
And it was almost like he opened up these doors.
Yeah.
And I went through them, and it was profound from the perspective as it's almost like he opened the door to healing. I wasn't stuck anymore. Yeah. And it wasn't like overnight.
Right.
But I went through that door and I finally moved and I started healing. And there was something about my connection with him, like the connection stayed. Like, as a matter of fact, with his death, the connection grew stronger and I felt his presence and I could feel him there. And I would be directed into these places and my healing started happening. Yeah. And then I went from healing to evolving and growing and expanding and thriving. And so for me, that experience of death, of my father's death, was profound. And it was the biggest gift that I had ever gotten in my life.
Yeah.
And it changed my life.
Absolutely. And I, with the death of my nephew as well as my friends, there is such a rawness that comes, a primal rawness of the human experience that comes from death. And it is a place of just, you have to, I don't know how to phrase this. You have to resign your ego. Mm-hmm. The resignation of ego is what death does. It makes you acutely aware of how precious life is. And I think it's really important when you were talking about how your healing began, because I don't know if this is your case specifically, but I think there's a level of forgiveness. There's a level of healing. There's a level of reflection that comes after losing these beautiful people, and a lot of reflection. And that's been the biggest lesson for me, and how I am completely changed. And that's in celebrating and ritualistic ways of those that have passed on, instead of living in the pain, which is so palpable. I had to find ways to celebrate. I had to find ways to honor. And that has been a part of me that, has changed tremendously, is really just valuing how beautiful those little moments and precious moments are that we have.
It's hard to talk about this, Angie, because we don't have words. This experience, there's not a single word that's going to do justice to this. And at the same time, I think what happens is, I'm only gonna project this. I don't know this for sure, that I think people are terrified of fear. Terrified of death. They're so afraid of it that they stay away from it. Like they pull away and they're in that fear. And yet, if you have the courage to just surrender to it, like you said, let your ego get out of the way and just be presence, just be pure presence, and just trust. There's something very beautiful about it. There is something very, very raw and very beautiful, and we know it in the deep core of our being. It's familiar. Just so many of us are really afraid to go there, and when you allow yourself to be there, it changes your perspective and experience of life. It's like, it sounds funny. It sounds ironic that death, when you think of death, that you think it's the ending of something. And yet when you really lean into it and you're present, it's the beginning. Yeah. It's like there's almost like a rebirthing, like you experience life on a different level. There's a depth, a depth to the experience. It's rich. Yeah. It's the opposite of disconnected, lonely, empty. It's the opposite, and yet it's the death that takes you to that space when you're willing to surrender to it and really allow the experience to come over you. Yeah, which is ironic, isn't it? Yeah, you've gone through this, and this changed you, and you. To say that you appreciate the experience is an understatement. So you go through this, and then you're confronted with your own death. Yes. With the cancer. And then you contemplate your own death after getting through the cancer. What was that like for you? It's like you're in a different perspective to the same thing. Yeah. You're like sitting at a different seat of the table.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting way of putting it. All the many seats I've sat at death's table. And, with the diagnosis and facing cancer, it was like one of those moments where it's like, you just do it. You go after it because you have to. And the most important thing in my mind was just to fight. And I didn't know what that looked like, but I needed details. I needed a plan. I needed to be able to map it out. I needed to know what my treatment options were. I needed to know what my surgery options were. So it was almost like a plan of action, and I stuck to that. During the time that I didn't know what stage I didn't know, and there was a lot of unanswered questions, I was looking at putting together a power of attorney. I was looking at, last will and testament. That was scary.
I bet.
It was very scary. And yet I had just had two amazing, beautiful friends I had lost to cancer, and I felt that they were with me. And in some ways I had a team of my team to say like, hey, it's, even if this doesn't go the way you want it, it's going to be okay. And I think I had to you have to make good with death. I don't know if that's going to make sense. Do you think that makes sense? Should I do something different?
Can you describe more what you mean when you say make good with
that? Being faced with a diagnosis of cancer and not having detail and not knowing what the outcome would be, there is a internal instinct that kicks in, and that's just fight. And yes, you're grappling with the many different outcomes, but again, there's something that kicks in that just says I just need details, I need plans, I need to know how to get through this. And I had a community of people that I had known that had either had breast cancer, and a few that I had lost to breast cancer, and I felt like they brought me a lot of peace during that time, and a lot of moments where I was just could not get out of my head. I could lean into their energy. I could lean into the lessons. I could lean into the little morsels that I had of things I could hang on to. So that was the cancer piece. And I have always been really good at fighting for something. So I think when I was facing suicidal ideation, SI, a few years down the road, again, it's because I didn't have anybody to take care of, right? Everybody was okay except for me. And you said, and you've always been very good at being you got to come back to you, that I do a lot of focusing on others because I don't want to focus on myself. So that seat at death's table was about me saying, I don't know if I have the will. I don't know if I have the strength. And at this moment, I don't know if I have the tools. And that was my low. And I had to at least say those things out loud. And I had to go through those feelings. And, I found a way out.
Well, it's surprising to hear that. I mean, you have incredible strength. You've been through so much. You've been there for so many people that you love. Like you said, you love hard, and you're willing to walk through fire with somebody that you love, and just know that you're going to be there. And then you get your own cancer diagnosis, and your response is to fight. And it was interesting because as you were saying that, I was thinking, fight. Okay, that's interesting. She doesn't want to die, but maybe it wasn't about dying. Maybe it was just about fighting because you knew how to fight. Damn it, I'm going to fight.
Yeah.
So maybe it wasn't so much I don't want to die. It's I'm going to fight.
Yep.
Then you get through that and you survive it, and then there you are. You're actually considering it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm struck by hearing you say, I didn't know if I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like your life demonstrated that you're a badass. You can handle anything.
Oh, man.
So what was it about that you questioned your own strength, that you questioned, your own, I don't know, kind of badass, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to your hope? What happened to your light in that moment?
I think some of that, let's look at that situation. I was in menopause.
Mm-hmm.
I had just started menopause. I was on treatments post-cancer. I was getting some injections. They're estrogen blockers. So my emotions were completely out of whack. Okay. And on top of that, I think the resonating feeling, and this is kind of where I talk about how silence is dangerous, is that the overarching feeling was that I didn't want to be a burden. And then I felt like all of my emotions were just going to burden somebody. And after going through cancer, after, having a lot of stuff happen in my life, the last thing I wanted to do was be a burden. And that is not a true thought, right? That is not a true thought. That is something based in shame and fear, and comes from anxiety, comes from, it's thoughts like that can be very harmful. So that's where it was for me. It was just a feeling of, I just didn't want to be a burden anymore. And, it was a very real experience. And this time I had gone to the park that was down the street from my house, and I reached out to a friend who was in law enforcement, and I wrote him and said, what happens if someone was to call 911, and, would an ambulance come? Would the cops come? And he stepped in right away. He said, what's going on? Where are you? Which I didn't want to answer. What I really wanted was details on how I wouldn't be found by anybody that knew me. And he was really good about redirecting me and saying, where are you? Where's Dane, my husband? You need to go wake up Dane. It's time for you to go home and wake up Dane. And just redirected in a very straightforward, didn't get into any analyzation. And because I was in such a desperate place, I was in such a despair with anxious thoughts that were not true. It was like he kind of snapped me out of it and said, okay, you feel this way, but this doesn't have to be your truth. So it's time to go home. And kept kind of just pushing me. And so I did. I went home and I woke up my husband, and, I had pills in my pocket. And I'm so grateful that I listened, and that I also had, there's resources. You have to lean in. You have to be able to say how you feel. Because had I let that darkness grow, had I not been able to say my piece, I don't know if I would be here. And so that is the point of talking about it. That's the point of not having words like suicide be so taboo, because we have to be able to talk about it.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting because it feels like it like your life has come full circle in some ways.
Yeah.
And obviously it's not the same, right? Because, people often think, oh my God, I'm back where I started. And that's never true. I think I used to share to you, you think you're in the same spot, you're not. It's a spiral staircase. Yeah. You can decide you're either going up or going down, but it may look like you're in the same spot, but you're really not. And I'm wondering, so you're in this place where you're in pain. And I know you're literally in pain too, because I know that was one of the driving forces as well. You talked about this just excruciating bone pain that you have as a result of the treatments that you went through. And so here you are full circle, and you're in your pain again, literally, emotionally.
Right.
And I'm curious, what did you do with that? How did you come out of that? How did you help yourself with that?
Therapy.
Okay, so that's good.
The number one thing, and this is a continued journey, is to try to take control of what I could control. And that meant going to my mental health providers and say, give me some information about menopause and mental health. This is where my emotions are. Give me some information about the shots. I can't do these shots anymore, and I can't do the bone pain. So what surgeries can I do? It's really like taking back my own power.
Right.
And that is what I did. I ended up getting, on the correct medication, doing the right therapies that I needed to do, and getting surgery so that I didn't have to take the bone medicine anymore. And at the end of the day, I was faced with myself. And it was like, I'm either going to have to take care of her, or I'm going to give up. And giving up is not in my spirit. And so I really just had to redirect and treat myself the way that I treated my friends, with grace and love and kindness, and just essentially like talking to my inner child again, and saying, you're okay. Leaning in, and just getting really honest about how much of my projecting and wanting to take care of other people was in some ways running from the inevitable, which was me.
Yeah. The one that needed taken care of
Yeah.
was you. And it sounds like you leaned into that.
Yeah, and I like taking care of her. She's kind of annoying. She's kind of, she's very weird.
That's okay. Weirdness is good. Embrace that weirdness. Embrace the inner weirdo.
I always say, let your freak flag fly.
There you go. Where's music for you now? Because in the beginning, it was your therapy. It was your lifeline. It was your way of healing. And where is that now for you? Because we didn't even get into the evolution of your music. We talked about what it was for you, and I even kind of said I'm curious about this because I know that you had this journey of bearing your soul and struggling with selling your soul, and if you want to get into that you can, but I'm just curious about what is music to you today in the regard of your journey, your own journey with healing and pain and all of that.
Yeah. In writing really, really intense songs, the last record that I did was all in reflection of a lot of loss and cancer. And that album, it had taken me probably 5 years to put it together. And it was tough, and it was tough to go out and sing those songs, and because I would relive them every single time, and I needed some time for reprieve. I needed some inward, just light, I needed some time to heal on my own. Again, like, what did I need? I just needed some time away from reflection. I'm a really good reflector. I'm the one that needs to be told, shut it off.
Time for a break.
Time for a break. So for me, what music is I just like to play music now. I just take little shows here and there, and it's all about the performance and the connection. And that fits perfectly with my life right now. It's every 6 weeks I play this venue up near my house that's, I don't have to drive very far. I don't have to worry about traffic. I don't have to, put together a big production. All my shows were like a wedding, because you have to worry about draw, and, I had extensive practices and set lists and everything. And now I just go, I hang up the hat of, all of my expectation, and I just let my gift come out and have that little bit of time with my crowd, and I sing my songs and I sing my heart out, and then I just leave it there. And that's what I needed. I just needed for it to be a passionate experience without expectation. It's a release. It's a connection. It's like being able to take a small trip that happens in an hour and a half with your audience, and exploring all the different places in my life that I've been, and exploring those places with the audience. And and I love that experience. The world of music has changed, and we live in a very heavy social media online. I don't have the time or capacity right now to get into the churn and burn. So for me, I respect it. I think it is an important piece of the puzzle. It's just not where I'm at. So I want to go, I want to play my shows. And another huge piece of that is me mentoring. I take such pride in that I am passing the torch of, my human experience as a musician on stage. I'm passing it to musicians that are so incredible, that are blowing my mind. Some of the best musicians I've ever seen are in our own backyard, So knowing that those people are there, I feel so grateful and honored. So a lot of my shows are, it's like Angie Stevens and Friends. So I'll just bring them all to the show, and we all just each do sets and just make it a community effort. And that's how it fits for me. To be honest, I haven't gone back to songwriting a lot. I have a few, but they're still very, very intense and still very personal. And, I'm using that as a space for me as far as songwriting and not a space for commerce.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not ready, and I'm not sure when I will be ready to share those with the world yet, as far as putting them out on a record,
I know that I have my own form of creative flow.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that when I dip into that, I feel that is when I feel the most connected to life itself.
Yes.
And connected to myself, and if to life itself and to myself.
Yeah.
And it is an incredible feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering for you, if it goes beyond community, it also goes to connecting to, just that life force, that creative energy, your deeper, the deepest, rawest creative part of your being.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, when I'm in a show and I've let go of all the expectation and all of the shit that surrounds that, you're exactly right. It's the sky connecting to the ground and I am the vessel. And there is no such thing of space and time. It's just gift and light and love and feeling like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing,
And that's the
complete
greatest high.
and utter yes.
Isn't it?
It's the greatest, it is the greatest high, but it's when I'm truly connected to everything,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, do you want to hear a song?
It's totally up to you. It's totally up to you.
Okay, well, I thought I would play a song kind of about my battles with mental health. In this song, I talk about being on the corner of terrified and bold, being on the corner of shattered and brave. And I think for me, it was the process of allowing myself to have duality, knowing that not only was I shattered in all of my feelings, but I was also still brave. And at first, when I recorded this song, I didn't want to tell my story. I didn't want people to know it was about me. But I realized that, again, that's just more stigma. And it's really just about letting go and just letting there's a freedom in honesty. So this is called Standing on the Corner. Standing on the corner of shattered and brave, she was clinging to the past and praying for change. She had pills in her pocket and a belly full of wine. She was looking for the truth and running out of time. Ain't that the way it goes? You're needed when you're needed till they finally let go. And ain't that the price you pay? Your heart is on the line and one foot's in the grave. She wrote a letter to tell you everything she did wrong. She mapped out every failure and outlined every flaw. But as the summer night beckoned her to follow it alone, she threw the pills to the wind and headed back home. Ain't that the way it goes? You're needed when you're needed till they finally let go. And ain't that the price you pay? Your heart is on the line and one foot's in the grave. I need you now. 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 standing on the corner, terrified and bold. She hails a cab to the future and slowly free falls. Every sign of love slowly coincides with the pain of the heartache that makes us feel alive. Yeah! Ain't that the way it goes? You're needed when you're needed till they finally let go. And ain't that the price you pay? Your heart is on the line and one foot's in the grave. Ain't that the way it goes? You're needed when you're needed till they finally let go. And ain't that the price you pay? Your heart is on the line and one foot's in the grave. Your heart is on the line and one foot's in the grave. Ooh. Is that
love
okay?
it.
That's great.
It was beautiful.
I loved it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Angie, thank you. I love you so much.
I love you so much.